What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking 5 big name players that will either be boom or bust for the 2025 fantasy football season. So make sure to tune in. If you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter, X at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. Let us hear it in the comments, your thoughts, along with any other questions you guys might have. We'll do our best to answer them all. But with that being said, let's get into it. As you can see, we have got the current full PPR rankings pulled up here for the 2025 fantasy football season. And like I mentioned, these are going to be big time players. So we're only going to be looking at the top 50 overall rankings. And I mean, without further ado, let's get into it. I said boomer bust players. So that means they have huge potential, but they also have huge potential for disappointing. And I feel like it's one or the other and nothing in between. Does that mean I'm not going to draft them if I have the opportunity? Not necessarily, especially if the price is right. But the person that's headlining our list, I feel like, and I mean, to nobody's shock, probably, it's Christian McCaffrey, right? The upside here is absolutely insane. And I mean, what is that upside? Even though despite not playing basically any games last year, still coming in as the running back 6 on Fantasy Pros here per consensus rankings. That means 18th overall player. But like, let's be real. If he plays the full year, McCaffrey, with how much he's involved as a pass catcher and the offense he plays on, like, he's going to be a top 2 running back for full PPR purposes. And I mean, that's the upside. Like, he's going right now, depending on the platforms you're drafting on, either like mid to late first round or like early mid second round. So if you want to draft him, like, you don't have to have the first overall pick to do so this year. But the downside is obvious. Like, you look at the track record, you look at the last, let's say, 5 years, and how many games he's played, the injuries he's dealt with, and it starts to pile up. And a lot of this, it might be recency bias. It might be that, you've gotten burned by him, so you're swearing him off, and I totally get it. But like I said before, he is the ultimate risk versus reward pick this year. And honestly, I feel like, a couple years prior as well, might even be the case next year on top of that. But with McCaffrey, it's all about the injuries. If he can play the majority, close to full, season, then he's going to be great. He's set and forget. He's matchup proof. He's everything you want him to be. But how confident do you feel drafting him potentially as your top overall running back, then maybe ignoring the position, loading up on wide receivers on other positions, and then, your next running back being like a low-end RB2, something like that. So it all depends with McCaffrey how you construct your roster. You're definitely going to have to handcuff him, so there goes another roster spot. But to me, as weird as it sounds, out of all the names that are going to be mentioned on this list, he's probably the guy that I'm most willing to take a chance on. And the reason for that is, like, I'm not worried about the talent. I'm not worried about the production. For him, it's about, the health. And when you're doing projections, we got to do it as if these players are going to play a full season, unless there's a pre-existing condition, injury during that point in time. The injury history, that's a separate category. Like, that's a risk category. And McCaffrey, on the other spectrum, probably has the highest risk out of all these names that we're going to mention. So it just comes down to your risk tolerance. I tend to be a guy that is willing to take more risk, because I know a lot of times when it comes to the fantasy football season, that's how you get ahead. That's how you stand out. So McCaffrey is definitely a guy that it's going to be boom or bust. It's going to be not for the faint of heart, but if you hit on him, chances are you're making the playoffs, you're making a deep run. But let's move on, right? McCaffrey was the easy name for us to mention. Next up, I'm going with Tyreek Hill of the Miami Dolphins. And with Tyreek Hill, it was a situation last year where, I mean, everyone was drafting him as pretty much the top overall wide receiver, close to it. And what did we get? Well, we got a performance that has led to Tyreek Hill now being drafted at the end of the second, early third round, depending on the size of the leagues. Comes in as player 28, wide receiver 15. And like honestly, I look at Tyreek Hill, and this is one of those situations where I can talk about performance. The injuries, I'm not as worried about the injuries when it comes to him as I am his quarterback in Tua. Because, I mean, when Tua was hurt last year, Tyreek was plain and simple not playable. You could not trust Tyreek Hill in your starting lineup, but that was almost the case for that entire roster during that process. And I mean, we know that Tua is like one bad sneeze away from potentially never playing football again. So you've got that aspect, but like even when Tua returned, like Tyreek did not catch as many passes as you thought he would. He didn't have that big playability. He didn't have that touchdown upside. Now, like, sure, Jonnu Smith got traded away, but I don't think one aging tight end that is like has had an up and down career while he's been in the NFL is going to be the difference as to why Tyreek goes from kind of a disappointing performer last year to now returning to a top 3 wide receiver. That just doesn't make sense to me. What I'm saying is Tyreek Hill is getting up there in age, and I saw the signs. I saw the signs last year. It happens to everyone. Like, you know, wide receiver becomes a position where the sexy names are the young guys, the guys that are, you know, have been in the league for like 1, 2, 3 years with the great quarterbacks. Like, that's not really the case in either situation for Tyreek Hill, and that's what worries me. Like, there were certain points where people thought he might be traded. He was unhappy. So I think Tyreek, again, like he could turn out like 1 or 2 more, I think, close to top 10-ish type of seasons. And right now, you know, again, if I get to the late third round or something like that, and he's still there, and the other wide receivers that I'm looking at aren't anything to like write home about, then I'll probably take a chance on Tyreek Hill. But I think that with Tyreek, it's a situation where the best days are behind him, and we're in this process of where we need to recalibrate what the realistic expectation for this version of Tyreek Hill is, and that's why you're seeing this ADP. But he could surprise and still turn in like, you know, a 70% version of the Tyreek Hill we've seen before. And that's what you're hoping for. But I think that the peak Tyreek is gone, and then that's going to bring into question like consistency issues, boomer bust games in general. So for that reason, Tyreek definitely belongs on this list. But let's continue to move on. Another name here that I want to highlight is Breece Hall of the New York Jets. Comes in as player 37 overall, running back 12. So with Breece Hall, like I've mentioned him before as a guy that potentially scares us, and, you know, that doesn't mean he can't be a boom or bust guy, because at some point the value is going to be there. Like right now, I see him being drafted in the 4th round. Last year, he was a 1st round selection. So the things that are going against Breece Hall, you've got Justin Fields being added there. He's a run-first quarterback, and, you know, he's going to take away opportunities. But the biggest thing is potentially the running back by committee that we saw being formed last year. Now, again, whether that was because the Jets were out of so many games in that process and they weren't competitive, so they gave backups a chance, and Allen really was shining for them, you know, or because they just weren't happy with what Breece was giving them. You know, that's open to discussion. But either way, what ended up happening is that, you know, it became a 1A, 1B type of situation. I think if anything now, it's going to continue. I don't think we're going to see huge volume from Breece Hall. I don't think that he's going to be an every down back. And I think it might be a hot hand approach, which terrifies the hell out of me anytime I hear that phrasing for the running back position. And again, you throw Justin Fields into that equation, then that's going to take away touchdown opportunities. That's going to take away rushing attempts. So Breece Hall, for that reason, I feel like is going to be very boom or bust. Like he could be a bust because if you're drafting somebody as a close to top 10 running back, but he ends up being in a committee, a committee does not, bode well for running back fantasy football purposes. Like think back to, the most recent one I feel like is Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, like that type of situation. Like this folks, this ain't a Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery type of deal with the New York Jets, where Jahmyr Gibbs is still being drafted in the first round. That ain't what we have here. So for that reason, I think the floor is much lower for Breece. Like, how can he boom? Potentially if the Jets just say, all right, now with Justin Fields, it's a new feel offense, and Allen doesn't have to get involved as much, and the Fields open things up for the rushing attack. Like, there's too many ifs here. That's what scares me. That's what worries me. I think Breece Hall, realistically, is probably going to be in the low end RB2 conversation, something like that, but TBD. Next up, another running back, name that we know very well, Alvin Kamara of the New Orleans Saints. This one pains me to put on here, but I just have so many question marks with not Kamara necessarily, but that New Orleans offense. Like, first and foremost, who's going to be your quarterback? Is it going to be a rookie? Is it going to be Rattler, who he hasn't looked good so far during his time in the NFL? Are you going to add somebody via a trade? And when you do, go in whatever direction you decide to with the quarterback, are you going to pepper Alvin Kamara with targets out of the backfield, which is what has made him valuable in PPR situations? Because, we've seen it before, like a year, 2 years ago, where Kamara wasn't getting those just dink and dump passes, and they tried to just kind of run him in between the tackles. Like that wasn't working. And it's when you start just like getting him like 6 to like 10 catches a game. They might be short yardage situations, but whatever. Like that's where his peak value is, and that's where he can just deliver and exceed expectations, similar to how it was early last year. But then when the offense starts to wane and die and just look for help, I feel like that's where Alvin Kamara really starts to struggle, and like he becomes the only potential offensive piece there. Now, hopefully, the return of Chris Olave being healthy will help everybody, but I just feel like with Kamara, again, he's another year older. He's never been a guy that's going to handle a bulk number of the carries and get like 20 carries week in and week out type of situation. But I still think that Kamara has a little bit left in the tank. It all comes down to how the Saints utilize him. And I honestly don't think anybody has that answer. That's why he's such a big question mark. You could convince me that he could end up being the steal of the first 4 rounds, but you could also convince me that, he's just, his best days are behind him, and you'd rather take a chance on, one of these other players that are right around this range. But let's move on now to the last name on our list. That is James Cook of the Buffalo Bills. Comes in as player 44, running back 16. So, like, you look at James Cook and you look at his production from last year, and you might be a little bit curious, like, why is he ranked so low? And I think the reason why is, you don't have to look that far. It's the top thing is Josh Allen is still there. He's going to be a touchdown vulture, but James Cook weirdly had a lot of touchdown success last year. Big touchdown numbers. And with fantasy football, the easiest category to see regression in is touchdowns. It's simply put, it is touchdowns. And not only are we likely going to see touchdown regression because of Josh Allen, but guys, Ray Davis looked pretty damn good last year when he was filling in for James Cook. Like, I wouldn't be shocked right now, right? Because James Cook and the Bills are going back and forth on contract negotiations. So that's another aspect into it as well. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if the Bills say, we don't have to, pay you as much as you want. We don't have to fold here. Davis showed us a lot of stuff that we like. He looked better as a pass catcher. So how much dual threat ability does James Cook actually have, which means a lot in these full PPR scoring formats? If the touchdowns don't come, then it'll be tough, because like a lot of his huge games, it's because he had multi-touchdown performances, like 2-3 touchdowns per game. And again, those are very, very hard to come by. And I wouldn't be shocked if, because of the touchdown regression, he doesn't come anywhere close to the type of production he had last year. Now, right, he could still end up being a value pick because he's on a good offense and he's going to get opportunities. But the touchdown regression, and honestly, more than anything, the potential increased involvement of Ray Davis is what really, really has me intrigued here. So for that reason, I do think that James Cook could end up being a boom or bust guy, just 1 year removed from his best season period. But with that, we wrap up this breakdown of our top 5 big name boom or bust candidates for the 2025 fantasy football season. If you guys enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter X at AllDayPigskin. Continue interacting with us there. Let us hear in the comments, and we will do our best to respond. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.